Welcome to another edition of the It's Cavalier podcast. It's your boy Mac, and tonight our Cleveland Cavaliers will be taking on the Washington Wizards in a game that also represents James Harden's Cleveland Cavalier debut at Rocket Arena. That is going to be a good one. Quite honestly, it doesn't matter about the competition. It just matters about James making his debut at home. Much anticipated at this point, especially coming off of these last two games or so, which have been absolutely phenomenal showings for him and for a number of other Cavaliers in particular. And just to kick things off here, I do have to mention, right? The Cavaliers are entering this game at 12-3 over their last 15 games, which happens to be the best record in the NBA over that stretch. It is not hyperbolic to say that this team is all the way back at this point in time. They have been playing some tremendous basketball as of late. Some of that before these new additions even arrived. Guys like James Harden, guys like Dennis Schroeder and Keon Ellis, right? They've been playing better basketball before they arrived, and the additions of those fellas has pushed the Cavaliers into a new direction and hopefully forward in terms of the standings, as they've already been elevating, and there's a lot working in their favor at this point in time with some of the news that's come out today in regards to suspensions. But before we get to all this stuff outside of the Cavaliers, let me just highlight a few stats in particular for this team over the last 15 games or so. They are first in points per game at 120.6. That's pretty big. I mean, to be scoring the most points in the league during the last 15 games, I think that speaks to them upping the level of intensity on the offensive side of the ball and a kind of a shift in mentality on how they plan to attack teams. You have seen them heavily focus on getting the ball into the paint and to Jarrett Allen in particular. They are second in overall field goal percentage at 49.4%. They are third in plus minus at 7.7 per game as a unit. They are scoring the fourth most points off of turnovers during this stretch at 21.5. They are fourth in three-point percentage at 37.6%, which is huge because we all know, if you've been following this team since the start of the season, this team had struggled to shoot out of the gate. And over these last 15 games, they've been shooting lights out. And yeah, adding a shooter like James Harden, who came into his Cavs debut with less than stellar three-point percentages, but a lot of that simply boiled down to the shot quality that he was getting. I mean, he was heavily monitored from a defensive standpoint. There was no space for him to get his shots off, especially off the ball. So with him being next to so many good shot makers in Cleveland, I expect that percentage to rise personally. And for the Cavaliers in particular, I expect that three-point percentage will hold as you get guys like Sam Merrill and Jalen Tyson and James Harden and Donovan Mitchell knocking down shots out there, and whatever else you can get from the likes of Dennis Schroeder, who we'll talk about in a bit, and Keon Ellis, who we'll talk about in a bit, and et cetera, et cetera. They are scoring the fourth most points in the paint at 53.7. They are scoring the sixth most second chance point at 16.4 per game. They have an offensive rating of 120.1, which is first in the NBA, number one in the NBA. Now, the defensive rating hasn't quite been as good as we probably want it to be, sitting at 11th at 112.1, but it could be much worse considering who is out, that being Dean Wade and Evan Mobley, both of which are still listed as being out as of right now, along with Max Strus. Those two ratings combined to make the Cavaliers third in overall net rating at 8. And then something else I did kind of want to point out here, the free throw attempts per game. They are 19th in that area at 21.2 attempts per contest. Something that I expect in the James Harden era to elevate as time goes on. And we know that through these first two games, it has been not nearly as much as we expected it to be. He has taken a total of 10 free throw attempts through two contests. He went 4-4 during his first game, and I want to say he went 6-6 in his second game. But again, as James Harden gets more and more comfortable with the rest of the teammates here, and his chemistry starts developing, and he knows where guys will be at, and he knows where his spots will be at with the Cavaliers, I think that he will only continue to get more and more free throw attempts as he puts the ball on the floor and attacks. And you saw that a little bit more in the Denver game, where you really needed Harden to get to the line at certain points, and the calls just weren't coming his way. And to a certain degree, it kind of lent credence to the idea that just because he doesn't play in LA anymore, those calls are going to start dwindling down. And for me, I don't necessarily buy into that, but that game was really pissing me off because it made me feel like that was the case. However, I do think that their free throw attempts per game as a unit are going to start elevating as the more and more that Harden puts the ball to floor and continues to drive inside. Ditto for Jalen Tyson and Evan Mobley when he returns, Donovan Mitchell, et cetera, et cetera. But I just wanted to highlight some of these because it's really telling just how aggressive they have been in terms of generating that offense out there. A lot of it coming from it in the painted area as they have continuously fed Evan Mobley game after game. And you have seen that yield so many good results for this team. And in that regard, I know I pointed this out the last stream, but Jarrett Allen has been absolutely phenomenal over his last 6 games, which pretty much encapsulates the entirety of that Western Conference or that Western road trip. Rather, he has averaged 21.7 points, 11.2 rebounds, and 2.5 assists while completing 70.9% of his field goals, which is huge, right? They've continuously fed him. He is attempting 13.2 shots per game over that stretch, which feels probably like a career best for him for any 6-game stretch. And I think as long as they continue to have that sort of mentality where they're going inside aggressively by getting the ball to Jarrett Allen or really just penetrating the interior of that defense with dribble drives, whether that be Harden or Mitchell or Craig or Dennis, or anybody else, right? You just want to continue to see them go through that painted area because it is a strength of their team. And we know that the Harden Allen pick and roll, that 1-5 pick and roll, is going to only continue to get better as the chemistry develops. And I think a lot of the question marks that people have about what this will look like. Will Allen be able to remain this effective once Evan Mobley returns? Hopefully, probably post All-Star break, as this is the final game that Cleveland will play until the All-Star break. And we won't see them again until February 19th, I believe, against the Brooklyn Nets. But a lot of question marks still remain in regard to how well Allen will be able to play, and will he be able to keep up this level of offensive consistency with Mobley back in the lineup and yet another mouth to feed, a big one at that in terms of overall touches out there. And to that I say, I don't worry about it as much because Allen has shown that he can be very, very effective off the ball. I mean, that's basically his entire role is off ball. But what I'm trying to say here is that I don't necessarily worry about another mouth coming in needing to be fed, especially a big man who James Harden will almost certainly involve as well downhill as a pick and roll ball handler out there, getting the ball to both of these bigs. The big question will be, I think, where's the positioning going to lie, right? Is there going to be a spacing issue between Mobley and Allen? I don't think so. I think that question has always existed between this front court, but with Mobley's recent emergence over the years as a spacer, and I know it hasn't been as good this year, I don't worry about that as much. My real question in regard to these three is, how are you going to distribute these touches? What does it look like? Is Evan Mobley going to get less front court touches? Is Jarrett Allen going to continuously be fed the rock in that painted area off of entry passes and allow the space to operate without Mobley being in the paint as well? Are you simply going to ask Jarrett Allen to be a subsidized or diminished version of what he is getting right now by virtue of Mobley's presence? Are you going to continue to allow Mobley to develop on ball and give him more touches, rendering James Harden and Donovan Mitchell off the ball more? These are all questions that I think are fair to ask at this point in time. But as we enter this All-Star break, we at least have one more game at the very least until we get another news break in regards to what Mobley's status is, and which I assume we will see him post All-Star break. I don't think there's any trouble with him coming back against Brooklyn unless something crazy has happened in his recovery. But I think they're just being cautious with Mobley right now. And maybe that's the same with Dean Wade. But at this point in time, I'm starting to believe that there won't be so much of an issue between the overall chemistry and overlap between Allen and Mobley, considering Harden's acquisition. I think that since he specializes in elevating bigs in particular in the pick and roll, in the dribble handoff, in being able to throw you those entry passes and getting downhill and dumping it off to you and hitting you out of the dunker spot or out in transition, as we've seen in 2 games already. We've seen Allen be very effective in transition when it's Harden pushing the pace and pushing the tempo. I don't really worry about it. And so I am very curious to see what this all looks like once these pieces start being put back into the puzzle, because we know that Max is another huge piece. We know that Evan is the biggest piece right now that is out. We know that Dean, he's going to be heavily relied upon without DeAndre Hunter on the roster anymore, not having so much size out of the front court, at least out of the 3-4 position. So there's still some question marks, but with the way that these Cavaliers have played over these last 2 games with Harden and going back 3 games with the additions of Dennis Schroeder and Keon Ellis, I'm confident as hell right now. Like, before this trade, obviously very, very skeptical about the fit between Donovan Mitchell and James Harden. But through these first 2 games with these 2 on the court, some of the concerns have been stymied, right? The off-ball roles of both and the staggering that Kenny Atkinson has utilized in these first 2 games together, it's been pretty solid. And while I do still have some question marks in regards to Kenny Atkinson's overall rotational choices, I'm not really upset about the usage of both at this point in time, because I do think that Harden and Mitchell have made it work. You have seen both of these 2 try and contribute when on the court together, even when the other does not have the ball in their hands. Now, cleaning the glass tracks James Harden's usage rate through his first 2 games at 26.4%. That's, to be quite honest with you, that is a substantial. I don't think anybody could have told you what the usage would have looked like. It was going to be such a question mark. But through the first 2 games that these 2 have shared the court together, he has a usage rate of 26.4%. If you aren't already privy to this, and I know I pointed this out a number of times during the initial trade stream, but he had a usage rate of 34.9% with LA this year through 44 games. So you're talking about basically a 8.5 to 9% difference in terms of the usage rate between Harden in LA and Harden in Cleveland, which is crazy. Now, obviously, not having to have as many on-ball duties as he had there was going to be the case, considering how great Donovan Mitchell is on the ball. But they've made it work, and I've been pleasantly surprised with the process here from Kenny Atkinson. But it is only a 2-game sample size, and I do expect that usage to go up slightly. I don't think he'll cross 30%, but I do think 28, 29 is certainly probably back in the realm of possibility for Harden as we get some more of these pieces back. He just won't have the gargantuan workload that he had with LA in terms of being on the ball and the offensive involvement rate, which is basically in the 100th percentile overall B-ball index for him. So very interesting to keep track of that. The concerns have been toned down a bit over on my end because of that and how they've looked and how Harden has kind of empowered others on this roster, like Jarrett Allen in particular, and Jalen Tyson to a degree. So I remain interested to see what that looks like moving forward. But through 2 games, it does look really promising. And as somebody who was skeptical of this move, considering all the necessary context that I think needs to be applied, slowly but surely, I'm coming around in that regard, because this was all about, taking advantage of Donovan Mitchell's prime right now and going for a title in a very open Eastern Conference. So I'm very, very interested to see what this looks like moving forward. In terms of Dennis Schroeder and Keon Ellis, couple of things really have stood out on the film, right? Obviously, Keon Ellis is an irritant out there, although the defensive field goal percentage won't tell you that. The peskiness that this man plays with out there on the defensive end at the point of attack has been nothing short of wonderful to see. Through his first three appearances for the Cleveland Cavaliers, Keon Ellis is averaging 2 steals per game. He has, I want to say, he has 6 steals in three appearances, which is crazy to me. Not otherworldly or anything like that. We already knew that he was capable of doing this type of stuff, but to me, like to see him do it in the wine and gold, to see some of the transition breaks starting that he has been heavily involved in, to see the ability to kind of cool guys off at the point of attack, it's been nice. And I think that will only get better as you get Evan Mobley back into the back line of defense, which may make Keon even more comfortable taking chances and gambling out on the perimeter. And so that'll be something to track moving forward. Now, offensively speaking, it has been hit and miss. Let's just be honest. He is averaging 4.7 points per game, and he is shooting just 35.7% from the field, with the bulk of that being from three-point distance, obviously. He is shooting 33.3% from three-point distance. There will be games, I think, where the shot falls, 3-4 attempts, maybe even 5-6, and you're like, oh man, this is a perfect 3-and-D wing. And then there will be other games, I think, where it'll be mostly impact on the defensive end. But again, this is just 3 games in and promising returns. He has attempted, it's not like he's attempted a crazy amount of triples during that stretch. He's only attempted 12 in his first 3 games as a Cavalier. That is, 4 per game, essentially, right? 4 per game. You're knocking down 1.3. That's not terrible, but it could be better considering that he was sold to Cleveland with the idea of, the idea that you're selling here is that this is a true 3-and-D wing and that he will bring impact on both ends of the floor with that line of thought. And I think that it will come together. And you do have to understand that these things take time as rotations are ironed out by Kenny Atkinson. And that's a big question mark right there within itself, because the usage for Keon has been like, okay, we're going to start you off you're going to play the second quarter and then you're going to start off the fourth quarter. It hasn't really looked as aggressive from a minute standpoint as I thought it would. I thought he would heavily lean on Keon, but considering the amount of guards we have, considering the amount of wings technically or players on this roster that can play at the 3, it's not crazy to see the minutes distribution being what it has for Kenny Atkinson and Keon Ellis. But I would have to think that as the season winds down and in the second half, right after All-Star break, I think you're going to see that improve. For me, I hope that remains a little bit more consistent and not just a game-to-game type of thing. But with so many players deserving of minutes, it's really hard to try and get to that point. It truly is. It's just one of those things where you obviously want guys to feel comfortable knowing where their minutes are going to come and at what point in the game they're going to come. But sometimes that's just impossible to try and divvy out to these guys. But I'll take it, man. The contributions that he's brought to the table have already been massively felt, if we're being honest here. And on the other token, the other portion of that trade was Dennis Schroeder, obviously. Dennis has been very surprising to some people, probably on the defensive end, not necessarily to me. I already knew that he was better than expected from the defensive standpoint, especially at the point of attack and being a pickpocket out there and being somebody that can rack up deflections and turnovers on the defensive side of the ball. But the offensive side has been up and down too, as expected through these first 3 games. Through 3 appearances for the Cavaliers, Dennis is averaging 7.7 points, 2.3 rebounds, and 4.3 assists. He's also averaging 1.7 steals. I want to highlight that too, to go back to the defensive end. But it's truly the field goal percentage that has left a lot to be desired. 33.3% from the field. And the worst part is 7.7 from three-point distance. That is not a typo. You did not hear that incorrectly. He is shooting 7.7% from 3-point distance to his first 3 appearances as a Cleveland Cavalier. He has attempted 13 shots from range and he has hit 1. Now, I said this on the last stream after the Clippers game, or the Nuggets game rather. The shot selection can be bothersome at a point in time, because he will pull up, he will pull the trigger from 3-point distance with a hand in his face. And sometimes you love that, guys being aggressive and hunting their shot and guys trying to get out of cold streaks. You want to feel comfortable as a coach, I'm sure, letting these guys play their way out of slumps. And I wouldn't necessarily consider it a slump, but again, he is 1 of 13 from 3-point distance over his first 3 appearances for the Cavs. So it's not nothing. I just wish that he would put the ball on the floor a little bit more and attack the rim. And I do think that will come, because coming to Cleveland, he was averaging 10.1 drives per game, which before the Harden trade would have been 3rd on the team behind Darius, Garland, and Donovan Mitchell. And with James Harden and Donovan Mitchell, he's still 3rd at 10.1. But with the Cavs, it's going to look a little bit different, just because you have so many capable ball handlers here that have and will play with the ball in their hands a lot more than he played with the Sacramento Kings. So that has to be taken into consideration. I don't think he'll always be charged with playing on the ball all the time, which, again, the catch and shoot numbers are going to have to improve for him, and the off-ball viability will no doubt have to improve for him. But through these first 3 games, you're going to want to see more from Dennis Schroeder as a driver of the basketball when he is able to, and not just simply pulling up when he gets the opportunity. Through his first 3 games as a Cavalier, he is averaging 7.7 drives per game. It's not terrible. It's definitely more than you were getting from Craig Porter Jr. and Lonzo Ball combined on a night-to-night basis. But as you continue to get comfortable, I just hope that Dennis is able to put the ball on the floor a little bit more when it is opportune, rather than pulling up. And to this point, he is efficient when driving and attempting field goals. That is what has salvaged his god-awful field goal percentage. He is actually completing 57.1% of his field goals when driving off of drives on 4.7 attempts per game. So 2.7 of his 4.7 attempts have been hit when he is driving the basketball and getting downhill and towards the rim. And then the other component to that is being able to make plays when driving as well. And he's done that. He has an assist percentage when driving the basketball of 13%. He is averaging 1 assist per game as a driver, which is not bad by any means. No stretch of the imagination, but you just want to continue to see that elevate. And I think that when you get Mobley back, when you continue to build that chemistry with Jarrett Allen or whoever he'll be playing those minutes with in the second unit at times, or that's Thomas Bryant or somebody else, or if they stack or Jarrett with the second unit or Evan with the second unit, I continue to hope that improves. But I've been pleasantly surprised with all of these guys. And that's probably the wrong way to word it, because there's not really too much of a surprise, because we already knew that they were capable of doing what they're doing. I just want to see it at a higher level. So going into this home debut for James Harden, what I am hoping to see is driving. I feel like there has been an over-reliance in terms of that 3-point shot, even though they've hit it well. Again, to go back to the graphic that I posted earlier, the Cavaliers are shooting the basketball very, very well over their last 15 games. They are shooting 37.6% over their last 15. And I continue to believe that will improve, probably even push them further up the rankings in this area with Harden in tow. But again, I want to see them put the ball on the floor more and attack the interior of the defense. And that, against the Washington Wizards, shouldn't really be an issue. This is a team in Washington that has essentially they're an upheaval right now as they're attempting to rebuild around presumably Trae Young, who hopefully stays with them. Maybe Maybe AD. I don't know what's going to end up happening this summer. I don't know what direction they're going in over there. I would assume that they are attempting to build around those two with the bevy of young talents and players and prospects they have over there and picks that they'll eventually get. We'll end up seeing what they do moving forward. But right now, no contest. This should be one that the Cavaliers should win handily, but should being the operative word here. We don't ever want to walk into a game feeling like it is a win, because when you don't take your opponent seriously, that's when they put you on your ass and make you regret having that state of mind. But you're talking about Balil Coulibaly, Bob Carrington, Alex Sarr, Kaishan George, and the likes of these guys over here. Sharif Cooper played 20 or so minutes off the bench for them. Shouts out to Cooper, former Cleveland Cavalier and Cleveland Charge player over there. But that just kind of tells you where they are at right now as an organization. These are two teams that are in two completely different weight classes, with Washington being towards the bottom of the standings in the Eastern Conference at 14-38. I think that there's no real way to sell this game as being sexy, right? It's a 14 seed in the Eastern Conference versus the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are the 4 seeded team at 33-21, winners of 9 of their last 10 games. Washington, winners of 4-6. So the real selling point here is to see the continued fit of Donovan Mitchell and James Harden and some of the other pieces that have recently joined, and Keon and Dennis. That's the real selling point to me, to see if they can keep the consistency moving forward. Can they continue to knock down the shots? Can Jarrett Allen continue his hot streak in terms of offensive efficiency and consistency out there and being involved? Again, Jarrett has been heavily involved in the offense as of late. He's averaging 13.2 field goal attempts per game. Will he continue to get double-digit attempts or shots up against Washington? I would think, I would hope, I would suspect that James and Mitchell, rather than trying to expend so much energy, especially heading into the All-Star break, that they just continue to spam Jarrett Allen in the pick and roll. And we'll see what ends up happening in that regard. But to me, this is more so just about continuing to get comfortable alongside his new teammates and continuing to build that chemistry out there in various areas. So tonight, I'm expecting a win, hopefully a blowout, so that we see some of the pieces towards the back end up the bench. Maybe we get real huge minutes from Keon Ellis tonight. Maybe we get a big game from Craig Porter Jr. tonight off the bench. Maybe we get big time minutes from Thomas Bryant. You never know. You truly never know in circumstances like this, especially heading into the All-Star break, where the minutes will come from. But with the 4-seeded team in the East and the 14-seeded team in the East versus the 4-seeded team in the East, this has trap game written all over it. So they have to be careful. We have been in this situation too many times to ignore the subtle clues here. The Cavaliers have been playing really, really well as of late. The Washington Wizards are 14th in the East. This is trap game territory if I ever saw it. So don't fall victim to it. Continue to do what you've been doing recently, and you will emerge victorious in my line of thought. It's always hard to tell what version of a team you're going to get playing against what is perceived to be much lesser competition. But if I was a betting man, I'd say this is one that the Cavaliers should win handily. I just don't want to see them miss an opportunity here with what's going on around the league in terms of suspensions and teams not necessarily looking as dominant as they had been to start the season. Detroit, speaking of that, they have levied out suspensions for the fights that just occurred the other day, right? In between the Charlotte Hornets and the Detroit Pistons. Isaiah Beef Stewart received a 7-game suspension, the most for any player involved. Miles Bridges received 4 games for his role. Musa Diabate received 4 games as well. And Jalen Duren, who mushed somebody in the face, right? He received 2 games himself. So those are some big time losses. Duren is a huge piece of that Detroit Pistons offense, and specifically from a rebounding standpoint out there in the middle. That's going to be a big loss. He's played at an all-star level this year. I think that beef stew, him being out as one of the bigger pieces on that team, especially from a defensive standpoint, those are big losses that the Cavaliers are going to have to take advantage of. Now, Duren missing 2 games, that's not really gonna hurt too much. But Stu missing 7 games, knowing that the Cleveland Cavaliers do have 2 games against this Pistons team in the not so distant future, that could be big. I mean, honestly, they play Detroit in 2 out of the final 3 games heading into March, right? Well, they play on the 27th, which is the final game that Cavaliers will have in February. They have a game in between against the Brooklyn Nets, and then they'll right back at Detroit, or right back against Detroit, rather, because the final game will be in Cleveland on March 3rd. So these are 2 huge games that beef stew missing could really impact if it goes that far out past the All-Star break. Now, Cleveland, let's see, 7 games from now for Cleveland, and I suppose I should be looking at the Detroit schedule. 7 games out for Cleveland is Charlotte, OKC, New York, Brooklyn. That's 1, Charlotte 2, OKC 3, New York 4, Milwaukee 5. So if Detroit's schedule is kind of set up the same way, they may miss, right? He may, in fact, miss both of those games, or at the very least one of them. But I need to look at Detroit's schedule. I'm just looking at Cleveland's for right now. But I say all of this to say that him and Duren missing time could potentially impact Detroit keeping pace for the #1 seed in the East. Because as of right now, in recording this, they are 7 games ahead of Cleveland. So we'll end up seeing what happens with that. But you can't ignore some of the other teams here too, right? Boston at 34-19, New York at 34-20. They're really just a game and a half ahead of Cleveland in total. So there's a game and a half in terms of separation between the 2nd seed and the 4th seed. So in the next 5 games, let's say 5 games, the Cavaliers could very easily be the 2nd seed in the East, depending upon how specific things shake out with teams, all over the place in the East. But something that should be said, it's not as if Boston and New York have been terrible. New York are winners of 8 of their last 10, and Boston are rather winners of 7 of their last 10. They're not trending downward, but I think you could easily say that Cleveland is right there too, and 9-1 over the last 10 and 12-3 over the last 15. So I'm very, very interested to see the seeding race here in Cleveland, but I don't think anything is out of the question right now. Not even the #1 seed. It's going to take a little bit more work and some luck and some things to go the right way for Cleveland and the wrong way for the Pistons, and on and on. But that's where we're at right now. I think that we need to go ahead and close things out here by simply heading into the chat. HJ17 Gaming says, Mobley not worrying about having to facilitate is going to be so fun to watch after the All-Star break. Yeah, I expect Evan Mobley to play more off-ball than on-ball like he did to begin this year before Darius Garland came back into the lineup. And right now, his usage rate stands at 21.8%, which is in the 84th percentile among bigs. I do expect that to decrease a little bit as Harden is going to take on some more of those playmaking duties and on-ball reps, and Tyson as well factors in here. So I think Mobley will probably go back to around 18-19%, which is around career average for him. And we'll see what ends up happening. Ohio Game Talk says, we're winning it all. I certainly hope so. Vandals Burner says Cavs by 100. I mean, that would be one hell of a thing. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but win by as much as you can. That would be nice. Redshift Galaxy says 6 steals and how many deflections? I need to check on that for Keon. I'm assuming that was in reference to the Keon statement that I made. He does, in fact, have the 6 steals, as I pointed to, 2 per game through his last 3 appearances for the Cavs. But in terms of deflections, I need to check that out right now. That's a stat I'm going to have to probably pull after the stream, because I don't want to sit up here wasting you guys' time going into the hustle stats specifically to search for them. and filtering everything out. But what I can say is this: I think that the deflections overall should be going up for a number of players across the board. I think James Harden has already shown his value there. I think that Keon Ellis, right now on the season, is averaging 2.6 per game. Now we'll see if that elevates to around 3 because he's in the, believe it or not, Lonzo was actually averaging about the same amount. Lonzo Ball was actually averaging, well, not a backsplit. He was averaging over 2 at 2.2 per game. So not crazy to believe that Keon, surrounded by better defenders here than he was in Sacramento at 2.6. I think you'll see that transition towards higher and higher totals, maybe up around 3 per game. Now, James Harden is averaging 2 per game on the season himself. So that's the real tell. If Harden get up around 2.4, 2.5, I'll be really excited. But we'll end up seeing what ends up happening with that. John Zoo says, we have so many hustle guys now. HJ17 Gaming says, Dennis' job is drive and kick to Mobley for offense and get to the rim, right? And be able to knock down the open shot. Same could be said of, at least in the latter point, in terms of knocking down the open shot. Keon Ellis, both of these new additions need to be able to do that. Beast Girl says Boston could end up moving into the number 1 seed. They certainly could, but I don't want to rule anything out right now, which would be absolutely crazy considering they haven't had Jason Tatum, who is rumored to have begun participating in 5-on-5 with, I think, Boston recently. Don't quote me on that, but that's crazy. He's prepping for a return, and they're a top 2 seed right now. That's just absolutely crazy to me, and that speaks to the level of firepower they have over in Boston. So kudos to Jaylen Brown and Derek White and a number of others over there who have really stepped up in the absence of Jason Tatum. And again, they're trying to break in a new piece with Nikola Vucevic. So I don't put anything past the Boston Celtics because they're just that high level at this point. Adam, that one guy, says, I remember over 3 key injuries last year in the playoffs. The seed definitely matters. I think so too. I think that the argument for seeding not mattering is so ridiculous to me. I think it's not like end all be all or anything, but I would much rather be a number 1 seed than a number 4 seed, to be honest with you guys. I mean, yeah, it doesn't matter overall, but it helps. Home court advantage definitely helps, truly. Hotline Bling is a good song. Says, I'll keep saying, is that a picture of Will Smith? As your profile pic? I'll keep saying it. Harden has never played with a well-rounded squad since Houston. Yeah, I mean, you got it, right? I think that when you look back at the Houston days, some of the same elements were there. Clint Capella in the pick and roll with Harden was money almost on a night-to-night basis. The playoffs are always a determining factor with that because of spacing sometimes being limited as defense tend to switch up on you guys. But I think that you see a lot of similarities here in between the Houston teams that were put around James Harden and the Cleveland team that is here now, albeit with a higher level of talent, because Donovan Mitchell is like probably one of the best, not even probably, he is one of the best players that James Harden has ever played with. And maybe not the best, but he's up there. And in terms of the backcourt, right, he has played with Kyrie. He has played with Chris Paul. He has played with Russell Westbrook. He has played with so many high-level guards out there, but nobody quite as dynamic, both on and off the ball, in my opinion, outside of Kyrie. And that was a very small sample size. He hasn't played with anybody quite, in my opinion, as dominant on both sides of the ball as Donovan Mitchell. If you want to count Tyrese Maxey, that's fine. I have no problems with that. But what I will say is this: I think that in terms of carrying the load of a team, not even Maxey was at that point. Donovan Mitchell has been there time and time again throughout the entirety of his career, especially with Cleveland, as he has shouldered a gargantuan load out there. But I mean, it's you understand what I'm trying to say. Harden is playing around a very, very high level of talents. So we'll end up seeing how this all ends to begin the season. Obviously, we're hoping it ends in a championship, but if they at the very least get to the finals or have a very competitive Eastern Conference semifinals that puts them, even if they actually, you know what? No, if they end up making it to the Eastern Conference Finals but lose, I'm still going to be disappointed considering the move that they just made. It's got to be finals or nothing. It truly has to be finals or nothing at this point in time for me to feel satisfied with what they decided to do in terms of Darius Garland and company. But I believe that the ceiling is higher than it was before the deadline. So we'll end up see what happens, but that's where I'm at right now. And I think that's probably a good place to end it until tonight. You guys know I'll be right here with you all, win or lose, preferably win after the after the game. And as I always say, if you are here and you're still here, consider hitting that like button. Subscribe to this Cavalier podcast if you're not yet a subscriber. Do the same for Positive Hooper. And I will see you guys tonight. Go Cavs.